beautiful Saturday here on the East Coast. And yeah, we just doing our thing here on Saturday. And, got a list of things I got to take care of and handle and all of that. So I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. But I did want to chime in on this particular issue of this very unfortunate situation that took place in the UK regarding a young professor at Cambridge University by the name of Jason Arday. And this is a guy who was a clearly a very rising star within academia, within the in British academia. He was getting a lot of positive press in the news, a lot of positive press and just all over when it comes to his takes and his inputs on things such as on issues of gender, sex, race, that kind of thing. And so his voice was one that a lot of people basically leaned on to, in academia. And but the reality is that this man built an entire world that was not based on truths. And there's some things that I've noticed that I said that I believe it's very important for us to make the distinction that because what we're seeing now is many people either within academia or just talkers on social media who are now trying to portray him because unfortunately due to the recent things that came out about him he could not handle it, and so he ended up ending his own life. And so now they're trying to make it seem as if the press basically was the one that really killed him. And what we're going to do is a quick breakdown to disprove that, and but to really address this deeper thing, because what I'm also seeing is a number of individuals who are trying to portray him as some type of, now that he's deceased, a patron saint of black people everywhere. And that's just not true at all. So we're just going to go through it really quickly. I'm going to pull from some what some people have posted that I thought was very interesting. And again, if you're just coming in, I hope you're having a wonderful day. And like I said, this is going to be a quick one. Okay, so number one, as I just outlined for you, if you don't know about him, I told you he was a rising star in British academia at Cambridge University. Um, but the thing is that this individual built an entire world around falsehoods about himself. He created multiple origin stories, which I am going to read to you, at least the ones that we know about. And then we're going to dive even deeper and talk about some of the other things. And and so let me, on that note, I'm just going to go ahead and jump on that so that you can hear it for yourself. These are the things, because what people are trying to do is they're trying to frame this as it was just about plagiarism. Now, plagiarism, as you know, is a very bad thing, and there have been many professors throughout academia who've been called out on plagiarism, and that is basically taking credit for somebody else's work. That's basically what plagiarism is. But it wasn't just the plagiarism, and that's the one thing I want people to understand, because a lot of people are trying to center it on that, and that's not the only thing. So what I'm gonna do now, let me go through, if I was at my home base, I would have this on the screen for you, but you can easily look this up, pull this up on your own. And I'm just going to read to you the other things that he included on his CV or his resume, the things that he put out to the public about himself, right? So let's just go through it very quickly so you can hear it for yourself. So here are the claims that he was making. One claim, he said that he did a 600-mile run. He claimed that he ran 600 miles from Edinburgh to London in just 6 days for charity. Experts noted that this would require averaging 100 miles a day, a feat matching elite world-class ultra marathon runners. Another claim he made, he said he ran 30 marathons in 35 days. He claimed to have completed 30 marathons in 35 days while managing epilepsy. He argued, oh, sorry, he alleged that during the 21st marathon, he suffered an epileptic fit fell and fractured his leg, but still completed the remaining 9 marathons. He also said that he did a solo multi-million pound fundraising. He was celebrated for raising millions of pounds for charity on his own. He later conceded that it was actually part of a fundraising syndicate, meaning that there was other people involved. It wasn't just him, and he should have been more explicit in correcting the one-man narrative. Right. Another thing is he claimed at various points to have been a former professional soccer player and a professional snooker player. I don't even know what snooker is. Maybe some of y'all can tell me. Now, let's get into the academic claims he made. False institutional appointments. Arday, official Cambridge biography page listed honorary appointments or past academic positions at Ohio State University, the University of Glasgow, and Durham University. Investigators revealed that he had not held these positions. He fabricated research data beyond severe plagiarism in his. Now, again, everything I'm saying is above the plagiarism stuff. Beyond severe plagiarism in his 2015 doctoral theses and subsequent papers, the Times published an analysis showing impossible data in his sociological studies, leading to accusations of outright research and fabrication. PhD in brain tumor story. In his upcoming memoir, he claimed that he had developed a brain tumor while writing his PhD, lost his memory right before his visa renewal, and had to completely relearn his entire thesis. Okay, these are all different claims that he made. Early life and medical history, nonverbal autism, and a literacy timeline. Arday's famous backstory, which propelled his rise in academia's DEI darling, claimed he had autism spectrum disorder, was entirely nonverbal until the age of 11, and remained completely illiterate until he was 18. Critics and journalists noted that these claims were highly inconsistent with his actual early academic timeline and lacked verifiable medical documentation. International charity work. He claimed to have traveled to South America, Brazil, and West Africa to install water pumps for charity water aid. Water Aid later stated they did not ask volunteers to do this type of technical installation work. So these are just some of the claims that this man made throughout his career, that were not true. They were not true. So again, a lot of people are trying to center it around that, oh no, it was just about the plagiarism. It was not just about the plagiarism. It was this entire backstory that he kept adding to that most of it, if not all of it, was untrue. Okay, and and I think this is a very important distinction to make because, again, what people are doing now is they're trying to portray him as some type of what you call it, a martyr, if you will, to white supremacy. But allow me to read to you something else that someone posted on X that I found to be very important, and it's going to bring everything together here. And if you're just joining me again, thank you so much for joining. We're just kind of going over this Jason Arday story that just came out of the UK. And it's very important that, especially here, those of us here, Black Americans here in the U.S., we're able to fully contextualize this with the facts and truth and not just hearsay that we're hearing on social media. So that's what we're doing right now. Anyway, this was posted on X by a person by the name of Simon Elmer. I'm not going to read the entire post because it's very, very long, but I want you to hear what he says in light of everything I just read to you as far as the claims that Jason Arday had made about himself. Okay. All right. So he says this. He says, in the UK, fraud is formally prosecuted under the Fraud Act of 2006. This defines fraud as false representation, which means lying or misleading someone intentionally, as failure to disclose information you have a legal duty to share, or as abuse of a position of trust. A person is guilty of fraud if he knowingly commits the above offenses in order to make a gain for himself or another, or to cause loss to another or expose them to the risk of loss. The gain or loss may be money or other property, including intellectual. A person guilty of fraud is liable on conviction to imprisonment up to 10 years or to a fine or both. Criminal prosecutions for fraud are handled by the Crown Prosecution Service. Civil actions are pursued by victims to recover lost money. Jason Arday was guilty of committing all three of these categories of fraud. But whom did he defraud and what? Now, this is the part that I think is very important for us to hear this part. The first group of people that defrauded by Jason Arday was the British taxpayer who funded the various grants he was awarded to gain his degrees at bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. None of these degrees should have been awarded, and he never should have received the funding to undertake them. But the British taxpayer had been defrauded of money that should have gone to a genuine student or students producing work or of benefit to our society, not DEI rubbish. This is what he's writing about decolonizing the very academic institutions he was defrauding. I think that's a very important point, and we're going to get to that in a moment because the irony here is that this gentleman here, Jason Arday, spent his entire career calling out white supremacy, but yet he used white supremacy to defend himself. And we're going to break that down too because people just kind of overlook that. And I'm like, I don't understand. Anyway, to be sure, Arday himself wasn't responsible alone for this fraud, and the various academics who oversaw the theses and the boards that awarded him for these degrees was also guilty of fraud and should be investigated, and if found guilty of complicity to fraud of the British taxpayer, compelled to refund the cost of funding. The second group of people defrauded by Jason Arday was the academics who were not awarded the positions in academia he was granted. Following the awarding of his fraudulent academic credentials, Arday was appointed to a bewildering succession of positions, including in 2018 a senior lectureship at the University of Roehampton before he had published a single academic paper, an associate professorship 2 years later at the University of Durham, a professorship 2 years after that at the University of Glasgow, and finally, in a year later in 2023, a professorship at the University of Cambridge. In a mere 5 years, therefore, Arday went from an unpublished student to a professor earning in excess of £100,000 per year at one of the highest ranked universities in the world. Now, again, I want you to understand the other professors that were overlooked in favor of him, these weren't just white professors. You had professors of other backgrounds, of other races that were overlooked so that this man, Jason Arday, could be promoted. Is that fair? Because a lot of times people just like to look at things just in black and white. But there are a lot of professors, there are a lot of academics that were out there who were black, who were Indian, who were of other races that were overlooked because of this individual. And this is something that you got to keep in mind. All right. The third group of people defrauded by Jason Arday were the scholars whose dissertations, articles, and books he plagiarized in his own fraudulent academic work is sometimes is in his work, sorry. It is sometimes hard for non-academics to understand the seriousness of plagiarism, particularly in an academic context. It means, first of all, that the plagiarist is unworthy of trust and should never be allowed in anywhere near an educational or pedagogical context which they have authority over children. Um, Jason was as Jason Arday was, but in more legal terms, plagiarism is theft. And then he goes on. He said, and I'll just skip here. He said the fourth group of people defrauded by Jason Arday were the scholars who were not awarded the publishing contracts for books that were passed over for this garbage that Arday published. This included such titles as Dismantling Race in Higher Education, Racism and Whiteness, and Decolonizing the Academy, which was published by, and then he goes on. So again, that makes the point that I was just saying that you had other academics, some of them were white, some of them were black, some of them were other races that were passed over because of this individual. So don't fall into the trap that he was just simply just it was black versus white. There were other academics that were passed over because this guy made this all this entire inventive world about himself. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to keep in mind as you hear about this story. These are all facts. The British press spent a great deal of time promoting him, but also protecting him. At the same, I would say the British press. Let me just say that again. The British press spent a great deal of time promoting him, protecting him, but it was also Cambridge University who also protected him as well. So what's interesting is that here you have an individual who built an entire career accusing white people, white supremacy of this, that, and the other, but at the same time, he believed that he himself was a victim of it. What this man tried to do is try to play both sides of the coin, and ended up failing. There was a case where there were several cases, I believe, where a member or two of the British press tried to go beyond the veil once this information started getting out and tried to find out, wait a minute now, you're making this claim, you're making this claim, you're making this claim. This ain't adding up. So what did Cambridge University do? They stepped in, called the police on the reporters, and basically set up a barrier, if you will, and basically sent a message to all the press and said, do not cross this line. I'm not talking physical now. I'm talking you are not to ask him these questions. So the so-called very racist police were used to protect Jason in his own lies. But yet, this man was being being uplifted as someone who was speaking against white supremacy. But yet, you're using white supremacy to defend him. So you don't get to play both sides, right? So that was one thing. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is this. From what I understand, he had an issue with autism. If you go through the list of that I just read earlier of all the things that he made up about himself, this is not coming from someone who had a sane mind. This man clearly has some mental issues. And that is something that you cannot play down. Now, I think this is very important for us to bring this out because, like I said earlier, what people are trying to do now is to make him the poster child of all black people. Now, as I'm saying, as a black individual, he does not represent me, or he never did represent me. There are many, many black individuals, both here in the United States, South America, Central America, Africa, in the UK, in Europe, name the place. Black folks all over the world who do not lie on their CVs, who do not lie on their resumes, who do not make up falsehoods about themselves. In fact, we go even harder a lot of times in being truthful on our CVs and our resumes because we understand what we're dealing with. This man, on the other hand, felt so comfortable within the seat of white supremacy, Cambridge University, that he felt that he could make up whatever he wanted to make up about himself, and they protected it. And so when a boiling pot is going to boil over if you don't turn the heat down, and what ended up happening was the truth came out, and now that the truth is out, Now you're trying to say, oh, see, the press, they went after him because he's black. No, the press went after him because he was a serial liar, but he was also someone clearly that was suffering from some mental issues that was being protected by the very white supremacy that he himself was claiming was holding black people down. You understand what I'm saying? So no, he does not represent the many black individuals out there who do not do that. There are many black people out there who are very truthful when it comes to their CVs, to their resumes, and they don't make up all this stuff. And neither do they get any kind of special passes or privileges if they do that. Now we can talk about DEI and all of that. I don't want to really get into that because yes, DEI does play into this, but I just want to stick to this this theme that keeps coming up over and over again, um, where the system is always trying to get black people to defend people who are psychologically off, people who do some very horrible things, and somehow we're supposed to be the defender of these individuals. And what I'm saying to you is it's unfortunate that this man decided to end his life, and that I feel very bad for. But for us to sit up here and to try to make him into some kind of martyr for black people everywhere, he is not a martyr. He built that world on his own, and he had the support um, the so-called white supremacist system that he called out on a regular basis and protected him in those lies. And that's it. There's really nothing else more. There's nothing else for us to sit up here and to feel any kind of way about. And it's the sad thing is it's not just this individual. There are many individuals out here who are living in these fabricated worlds where they want to identify as a different gender, they want to identify as a plant or an animal or a tree or whatever it is, and we're supposed to sit back and say that's normal. That is not normal. You have, and I talk about many times, you have, and when we're talking about transvestites, people who go through gender reassignment surgery, we are telling our young women that it's okay for them to go out, to literally have their breasts cut off, to literally have their reproductive organs to be pulled out of them and have other things happen to them so that they can be seen as whatever it is they want to identify with at the moment. And we are supposed to sit back and say that's normal. That's normal behavior. That is not normal behavior, period. It's not. And so I guess I keep doing these little videos because I feel like you ever see these movies where it's like the world has already been destroyed, and then it's like many years later and they're like, oh snap, I found a video, and it's like very grainy, and it's that one person saying, okay, this is what really happened, and this is why this is where we failed, right? So I don't know where this video will go. Don't know. Who knows? Anybody listening? But I do want to be a voice of truth out here and saying, no, we're not going to sit up here and fall for this and trying to put that all on black folks. All black people do not deal with that. All black people do not lie on their CVs and all of that. You know what I mean? We don't do that. There are many black people who are very truthful out here and they understand the value of that. But this man, unfortunately, did not do that. And he could not take the criticism, and his mental instability as a result, it crumbled in real time. It literally crumbled in real time. How are you going to put somebody, Mauricia, how are you going to put somebody in who's dealing with these conditions in a high position of authority when you know full well that condition is going to be very susceptible to certain pressures? Do you understand what I'm saying? If I know someone has a mental instability or mental issue, the last thing I'm going to do is put them into some high position of authority. It's not because I hate them. It's because I don't want to subject them to a situation that's going to trigger them in such a way where they may do something that they may self-harm themselves. But we live in a world today where what they do is they say, no, that's normal. If you don't uplift these people, then somehow you're anti them. Yeah, they said because she said here because they can't discriminate by law, which is true. Yeah, he was probably higher functioning, and you do just because someone has a, and she brings up a good point. Just because you may have a mental issue, it doesn't mean that you're like loopy and you can't figure things out. There are many people out here who have mental issues who are, like she said, that are higher functioning. They can understand, they can do the day to day, they can drive a car, they can do regular functions that most people can. But there are things back there that you kind of have to put an asterisk by because, and that's the part that a lot of people don't want to be honest about because they feel like they're going to be offending them. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to put somebody who has certain issues on the front line of a battle. I may say, "Wow, let me reassign you somewhere else because I don't want you getting triggered on the front line." You know what I mean? But yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, but here's the other thing that I want to mention, and then we'll close this out. We're going to see, and I wish I could really, and I was talking with my wife about this last night, but I just feel like as much there's certain things I want to say. I just don't think people are quite ready to hear the whole thing. But let me just say this: you are going to continue to hear about black individuals ending their lives like he did. This is going to be, you know how we talk about different trends on social media and everything is equated to a trend? Black suicide is going to become more and more of a trend. I know some of y'all not ready for that, but it is. And unfortunately, we live in a world, and I would encourage you to read the post that I posted on the community page late last night and read more about it. And I talk a little bit about it as to why that is. But unfortunately, a lot of people aren't ready for that because we're too busy wanting to mask mental instability, mental illness as some type of Jim Crow type situation. We don't want to deal with the facts. There are people out here who are so depressed that they would do some very horrible things to themselves, knowing full well that afterwards people are going to talk about them. Now, I know that's hard to believe, but what I am telling you is that it's going to continue to happen. It is. And people are going to continue to make things up and try to shift the blame on other things. But what I am telling you is that we are in a mental health crisis. And what Jason Arday just demonstrated is just yet another example of that. We're in a mental health crisis, particularly amongst black individuals. That is what we should be talking about. That is what our focus should be on. And we have to be willing to have those, not just the discussions, but taking active steps on how to address it and how to deal with it in a very loving and caring way. But those types of cares, if you will, are going to be things that we do offline, not online, because you can't get the proper counseling you need by a bunch of faceless people on social media. You need to actually sit down with some real professionals who are really trained and really have a demonstrated care about the people that they work with. And so that's what I try to do on this platform is I really try to get people to consider going to get some type of professional help when it comes to depression, when it comes to whatever it is, the inner angers and stuff that you deal with. The only things that we can do mainly on this platform, of course, we can address that, but we also talk about your diet. We spend a great deal of time talking about herbs and all that kind of stuff and things you can add to your diet the natural way to help yourself. But that's just a little bit. That's just a little slice. The much bigger things, this is stuff that we have to take seriously. And so just to wrap this up again, we are very saddened to hear about anybody that's ending their lives earlier, over some very trivial things, quite honestly. But what Jason Arday, what he demonstrated is that the issue of mental health is something that's very real, and we cannot mask it over. We got to stop masking it over with all these different stories and things like that. We have to take it very seriously, and let's not fall into this trap of always just simply spinning these cases into Jim Crow stories or whatever it's out there that makes it easier for us to take in. We have to be brave enough to start talking about these things. And but I also am a realist and someone who's looking at this stuff every day. And I am telling you that you're going to see more and more of these stories. Right. Someone say he's not even a black American. We're not responsible for him. Well, that's true. That's true. That's a very true statement. And but I want us to also realize. But you see how they're trying to make him into every black person in the world, and that's not true. So we address that, but we're also addressing even the stories here. You can't project one person's illness on every black individual. That's not being honest, and that's not being fair. That's not a fair assessment at all. So anyway, that's it. I just wanted to jump on here real quick and talk about that because it does move me. Anytime I hear of a story like this, it's really sad to hear. But I wanted us to put it in, frame it correctly and factually, because there are some underlying things that we need to be straight on, and that this man does not represent all black people. He only represented himself, and he created that whole world himself. And unfortunately, he couldn't handle it. And that's sad. So, anyway, that's it. I hope you got something out of it. Most importantly, I hope it challenged you to always, always dig deeper and ask the more meaningful questions and allow the facts and the truth to come out. If you can do that, man, come on. We're gonna have a wonderful journey together. All right. You guys take care. Love you guys very much. Mauricia, I really appreciate you very much. One day we're gonna talk, sis. Life has a lot of curveballs, I tell you, but we gonna hook up one day, right? And everyone else, each and every one of you guys, thank you so much. We'll be talking again soon. We're going to be doing some things over on sambatree.com. Sambatree.com. Check your emails because we're about to drop some stuff. It is dropping tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a huge day over at sambatree.com. All right, so make sure you check your emails. Some man, these products are awesome. I'm just saying. So if you are one of these natural guys and girls out there, I've been using some of this stuff on my beard. I've been using stuff on my skin. Oh my goodness. So make sure you check us out over at sambatree.com. All right. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.